Hello, and welcome to my presentation on George Washington. Let me go ahead and move this face cam. George Washington and his faith in Christ, his beliefs, influence on American history by Gavin Boyd. Introduction. George Washington was the first president of the United States and widely known as one of the most influential leaders in all of world history. He was not only a military leader, leading America to an underdog victory against Great Britain, which, fun fact about the war, a lot of clergymen and people, especially from the church, during this time actually played an active role in the war, both as preachers and as fighters. So some Protestant ministers, particularly from the Presbyterian traditions, actually encouraged rebellion against British rule, seeing it more as a moral and religious duty. The British even referred to these politically active ministers as the Black Robe Regiment because of their influence. So a lot of religion taking course, a lot of faith taking course through this war, not only in themselves or their country, but faith that God has backed up their position, their fighting, and that they're doing it for the greater good. So, he was a man of genuine purpose through his faith in Christ. So he had his purpose, and his purpose was to defeat Britain. So he was a very driven man. While being private about his religious beliefs, Washington's faith played a critical role in shaping his values, leadership style, and vision for the United States. This presentation will cover Washington's Anglican upbringing, his expressions of faith during pivotal moments of the Revolutionary War, his approach to religious liberty as president, and how his spiritual beliefs informed his vision for the creation of the United States. Religious background. Religious background in childhood. George Washington grew up in the Anglican Church in Virginia, where his family regularly attended services at Pohick Church. Although not extremely religious, the Washingtons followed typical customs like saying prayers and celebrating Christian holidays. When George was 11, his father died, which may have influenced how he thought about God's role in life. So, fun fact about George Washington's dad, he likely died from a sudden illness. Possibly dysentery or another infectious disease. We actually don't know how he died. But yeah, I mean, George was 11, so his father's death definitely impacted him spiritually in his heart. And, that's a young age to have to just grow up and have the world being thrown at you. But that's a kind of a pivotal point where you either choose faith in Christ or you choose to substitute that pain with something that is worldly. And George chose the first. He chose to put his faith in Christ. Because while growing up, he learned the basic Christian teachings along with moral rules from the Rules of Civility, which is a guide to proper behavior that he copied as a boy. These religious experiences helped shape Washington's strong sense of duty and moral character that would guide him through his life. Here's an image of the Ten Commandments. Adulthood and marriage. After growing up, Washington continued attending the Anglican Church and married Martha Custis in 1759 in a church ceremony. While not overly religious in public, he took on practical church responsibilities as a vestryman at Pohick Church and later Christ Church in Alexandria, helping manage church business and property. So he was kind of a political figure in the church there for a little bit. Martha was known for devotion to daily prayers and Bible reading. The couple often attended church together, and Washington respected Martha's religious practices, which, is important, further reinforcing religion's role in their household and marriage, which is why they definitely, in my opinion, had a successful marriage, because they had that same foundation, those roots, if you will, in church and with Christ. At home in Mount Vernon, the Washingtons said prayers and grace at meals, with Martha becoming more openly religious than George. So she was more open about it. Washington owned Bibles and believed in God's guidance, but he wasn't the type to talk much about his personal faith. His faith in Christ shone through his behavior and moral character rather than through his opinions or specific church doctrines that he would talk about. It was more through his character that Christ really, really shone, which is an indication of a true follower of Christ. The influence of Christianity in Washington's political career. George Washington actually believed that religion and morality were essential for a strong nation, which I happen to agree. But he also valued religious freedom, which I also happen to agree. He spoke about divine providence, which divine providence is basically the belief that God actually governs and directs the universe, guiding events and the lives of individuals according to like some divine plan, like God's plan, if you will. It's the idea that everything in life, from major historical events to personal circumstances, occurs under God's watchful care and through his direction. And you can either choose to follow that or you can choose to follow against it. So that is the typical, Bible-believing Christian philosophy behind the divine providence. He also believed that a higher power guided his life and the country's future. While he attended church and supported religious values, he also made it clear that the government should not favor any one religion. So this is also a key indication of Christianity, because you're not going to force God's love on the people. It's either you're going to plant the seed, you're going to spread the gospel, and let Christ do the work. You can't force people to believe what you believe. He defended the rights of all religious groups, including Jewish Americans, Catholics, and Quakers, promoting tolerance and unity. During the Revolutionary War, he encouraged faith and moral discipline among his soldiers, believing it would keep them strong. His leadership set the foundation for America's commitment to religious freedom, proving that a leader could be guided by faith while respecting the beliefs of others. So, some powerful stuff there through his career. He was definitely very tolerant, definitely very loving to everybody. Everybody was American in his eyes. He saw everybody as a united nation rather than a nation of different peoples and different cultures and different groups. He saw everyone as American. Obviously, when they won the war. But even at the time, they were, there's the Patriots, there was, that whole war going on, and they fought on that united front. So, presidency and key impacts of faith. Oh, can't put it over the cross. There we go. During his presidency, George Washington took key actions to ensure that religion was respected but not forced by the government. One major step was his proclamation of National Day of Prayer and Thanksgiving in 1789, where he called on Americans to reflect on their blessings and express gratitude. Washington also set an example by showing that religion could inspire moral leadership without interfering in politics. He was deeply committed to setting a standard for integrity from his faith in Christ, believing that a country founded on morality is necessary for the country's survival. This implies the rights of the people come from God, not from the government. Right? So, the earth, and what the earth says your rights are, is not what God says your rights are. So we should listen to God, and not what people have in power, is what George Washington is saying. In his farewell address, he stressed that a nation's success depended on its people, like the people upholding the moral values, which included faith and a personal responsibility. So George Washington had trust in the people to provide this moral responsibility, rather than imposing it or forcing it on people like we see in a lot of Islam or Arab countries. It's like Sharia law. It's like you're forced to, think the way they do, to do works, to do good deeds. It's none of that. It's personal faith, and it's a personal trust and commitment. And we've seen that freedom and how it's taken the course of America over, American history. Post-presidency and legacy. After leaving office in 1797, George Washington retired to his estate at Mount Vernon, where he remained active in managing his land and overseeing various projects. Even though his days of holding political power were over, his religious beliefs and moral values continued to shape his actions. Washington continued to attend church services and remained a strong believer in Christ and the divine providence. The way he lived his life after having so much political power reflected on his overall purpose through his life by never being corrupted by idolatry or worldly oppression, living with tolerance and grace. His legacy as a man of faith, duty, and principle lived on after his death in 1799. Many Americans saw him as a symbol of virtue and leadership, and his commitment to morality, integrity, and national unity influenced generations to come. So, in my opinion, I see Christ shining through George Washington. He has Christ in his heart. He has these values that are instilled in his heart, and these values are just a product of Christ. They're almost pouring out of him in a way. Like, to want to lead your country and put your life on the line and put everybody on the line. You can't rely on your own understanding. You have to rely on God. You have to rely on his understanding and let the divine providence, like I mentioned earlier, lean on that. Lean on God's plan. Conclusion. To conclude, George Washington's faith played a key role in shaping his character, leadership, and vision for the United States. Washington's emphasis on moral character and unity is still relevant today. His warnings about the importance of religion and morality in public life, as mentioned in his farewell address, remind us that a strong nation depends on the values of its people. His leadership showed that faith can guide a person's actions without forcing belief on others. This is a balance that remains important in modern society. Ultimately, Washington's legacy continues to influence American ideals of the freedom of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which has shaped and changed most of the world. America's power and influence are leading by example, and our liberty is contagious. The rest of the world envies a leader like Washington that can establish freedom, dignity, and purpose. Thank you for listening to this presentation. Y'all have a blessed day, whoever's listening, and appreciate your time.